The chamber of the Galactic Council was built to hold the most powerful voices in the galaxy. Its walls were made of white stone from the moon of Kelra, and the ceiling was a vast dome filled with holographic stars. Normally, the air was alive, with sound different languages echoing, translators working, leaders shouting for their worlds. But today it was silent. Every eye was fixed on one section of the great circular table, the place where the humans sat. There were 12 of them, dressed in the simple, dark uniforms that carried no rank but were instantly recognizable. They had been silent for the entire meeting. Other species had spoken, some pleading, others demanding, and a few openly mocking them. The humans had listened. They had taken notes. Their faces showed nothing. Then, without warning, the man at the center, Ambassador Kieran Holt, rose too. His feet, chairs scraped against the floor as the rest of the human delegation stood with him. It was not sudden or rushed. It was slow, deliberate, like a decision they had weighed for a long time. The sound of their chairs moving echoed across the chamber in a way that made the alien delegates shift uncomfortably. Kieran placed both hands on the table, looked around the room, said nothing. The translator drones hummed in anticipation, waiting for words to carry across the galaxy. But no words came. Instead, Holt's gaze swept across the alien leaders, pausing for a moment on the Kelron Prime Minister, then the Veil Consortium speaker, and finally the Grand Chancellor of the Council. His eyes were cold, steady, and unreadable. Then he turned and began to walk toward the exit. The rest of the humans followed, boots striking the floor in perfect rhythm. Not a single one glanced back. Whispers began almost immediately. "What are they doing?" One delegate muttered. "Is the meeting over?" asked another. "They can't just, but they could." And they did. The great doors at the back of the chamber opened with a deep metallic groan. The humans walked through, and as the doors closed behind them, the sound echoed like the lid of a coffin being sealed. The chamber fell into a deeper silence than before. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then the Grand Chancellor leaned forward, his frilled crest twitching in unease. "This is unprecedented. Does anyone know the meaning of this?" No one did. Across the galaxy, billions were watching the live broadcast. The sudden walkout was being replayed on news screens in spaceports, military bases, and civilian homes. Everyone had the same question. What had driven the humans to leave without a word? A small tremor passed through the Council's central communication hub. The holographic feed flickered for half a second. Most thought it was a technical glitch. But in those brief frames, something strange appeared, an image of massive human warships in high orbit over a planet, and then the image was gone. The Council technicians dismissed it as an error, but a few sharp-eyed viewers caught it, and the rumors began to spread. In a dark corner of the chamber, one of the Council's intelligence officers leaned toward her superior. "Sir, we have confirmation from our deep scan relays. Human fleets are moving." Superior blinked. "Moving where?" "That's the problem," she whispered. "Everywhere." Back on Earth, the walkout had already been anticipated. Military channels lit up with orders. Civilian shipping lanes were quietly closed. Long-range patrol fleets turned inward, returning. To their core worlds, massive orbital docks began waking from years of inactivity. To the public, nothing seemed unusual, yet the signs were there for those who knew where to look. In the shipyards above Luna, enormous engines roared to life. Half-built cruisers were suddenly flooded with workers, their hulls sealed, weapons installed in the asteroid belts of Epsilon Eridani. Hidden drone factories activated, sending out swarms of construction units, and deep beneath the ice of Europa, encrypted command codes pulsed through the water-covered tunnels, reaching submarines that had never officially existed. Inside the Council chamber, debates broke out. "This is an insult," shouted the representative from the Raoul Union. "They have abandoned diplomacy." "It is more than insult," replied the Threx minister, her long limbs trembling. "They are preparing for something large." "Bah," scoffed the Kelron Prime Minister. "Humans have always been dramatic. They want attention, nothing more. I say we ignore them, But not everyone was convinced. The veil speaker leaned forward, her voice sharp. Ignoring humans when they are angry is like ignoring a storm when the wind starts to scream. You can pretend it will pass, but it will not. Far from the council's debates, in the black of deep space, a single human carrier drifted silently. Its hull was darkened, engines cold. But inside, thousands of crew members moved with precision. Fighters were being armed. Armor was being fitted. The carrier's captain watched from the bridge, hands clasped behind his back. "Orders, sir?" the second asked. The captain's voice was calm. "Hold position. The council will send their spies soon. Let them see nothing. And after that, the captain said, his eyes narrowing, we remind them why silence is dangerous." Back on the council's homeworld, the chancellor's aides tried to contact the humans. Every message was returned unread. Every channel was blocked. In the streets outside the chamber, citizens gathered around giant public screens. The footage of the walkout played over and over. In slow motion, you could see Holt glance at the council's leaders before turning away, a look that some interpreted as disappointment, others as warning. Some feared this was the start of war. Others believed it was a bluff. No one noticed that in the human sector of the city, the embassies had already been emptied. No diplomats, no staff, no equipment. The buildings stood silent, locked, and dark, and in orbit above the planet. A human diplomatic transport left without filing a flight plan. It accelerated toward the edge of the system. Engines burning hot inside. Ambassador Holt sat alone, watching the stars stretch as they entered faster than light travel. His communicator blinked with an incoming message. He opened it. It was a single line from Earth's High Command. "Begin Phase 2. The ambassador closed his eyes. In the council chamber, light years away, they would still be arguing, still wondering. But the decision had already been made. Humanity was done talking. The walkout was still the main story in every corner of the galaxy. News anchors replayed the moment again and again, speculating on hidden meanings. Some called it a calculated political move, as others warned it was the start of something far worse. But far from the cameras, in the shadowed corners of human space, things were moving. There were no grand announcements, no flashy displays of power. Humanity did not send a declaration or a threat. Instead, their actions were quiet, almost invisible. To anyone who wasn't looking closely, merchant fleets suddenly stopped taking new contracts. Cargo ships already in transit returned home, carrying goods that were never delivered. Spaceports near the borders were closed for maintenance, yet no workers entered them. Civilian communication channels became strangely silent. Where there had once been a constant flow of trade deals, route updates, and casual chatter, there was now nothing but short, encrypted bursts of data. The Council's long-range scanners began to notice faint signatures, warship engines warming. In the depths of space, it wasn't the full power of a fleet. It was subtle, like a whisper. But the number of whispers grew each day. Some of the Council's spies tried to slip into human space. They never returned. The few who did came back with broken ships and empty eyes. One report that leaked described something strange. Whole regions of space where all navigation beacons had gone dark, as if the humans had deliberately erased them. It was like they were creating pockets of emptiness, places where outsiders would be blind, even friendly species. Those who had long traded with Earth found their ships stopped at the borders. The humans were polite, almost too polite, but their words were final. Turn back. This is not the time. Inside the Council, analysts pieced together the fragments of information. What they found was unsettling. The humans were not simply building defenses, they were preparing. But for what? The answer came in the form of intercepted freight orders. Massive amounts of raw materials, titanium, neutron composites, antimatter fuel were being shipped to locations far from any known shipyard. One analyst put the pieces together and spoke the thought no one wanted to say out loud. They're not fortifying. They're positioning. Some council members laughed off the idea. Humans do not have the industrial capacity to maintain large fleets without us noticing, one said. But the Veil speaker shook her head. You still think of them like the younger species they once were. You have no idea how far they have come. While the council argued, the human fleets continued to shift. Patrol ships disappeared from their old routes, replaced by fast, silent vessels with no visible weapons. Massive cargo haulers vanished into uncharted regions, never appearing on scanners again. On the edge of human space, at an abandoned mining station, a squadron of warships rendezvoused in total darkness. The ship's hulls absorbed light, making them almost invisible even at close range. The captains met in the station's cold, empty command room. No greetings were exchanged. They knew why they were here. Orders were delivered in sealed data. Cores. Each captain took one, locked it into their ship's systems, and left without a word. When they were gone, the station powered down again, vanishing into the void as if nothing had happened. By the end of the week, every known human embassy in foreign space was closed. Their diplomats went home. Their trade outposts shut down. From the outside, it looked like humanity was retreating. But for those who knew war, the truth was clear. This was not retreat. This was preparation. In the darkness beyond the reach of the Council's eyes, humanity was setting the board for a game the galaxy did not yet realize had begun. It started as nothing more than a line in a Council security report. Minor pirate activity detected near the Yarth system. The Yarth route was a quiet trade corridor far from the great political centers. Piracy there was rare and usually lived. No one in the Council thought much of it until the second report arrived. 3 human freighters and 1 escort. Vessel had been ambushed by a pirate fleet of 20 ships. The pirates were led by the Karrick Brotherhood, infamous for leaving no survivors. Their ships were fast, well-armed, and feared even by the tougher border worlds. The Council expected the human convoy to be lost before any help could arrive. But help never came, because it wasn't needed. When a patrol frigate from the Lothary Protectorate reached the system, it found only silence. 20 pirate ships were reduced to drifting wreckage, their hulls burned through with precision strikes. There were no distress calls, no signs of a long battle. According to the patrol captain's log, the destruction had been so surgical, it looked like the pirate ships had been taken apart. Reactor cores were pierced in ways only possible from extreme close range. Weapon systems removed in single shots, engines shredded so cleanly that some still floated intact among the debris. The human freighters were jumped to faster-than-light travel without even waiting to be rescued. The only signal left in the system was a short-burst transmission on an open frequency. Do not interfere again, the Council reviewed. The recording in the central chamber. The message was calm, almost casual. The voice was human but carried no trace of anger, just a cold certainty. Some in the chamber tried to downplay it. They were pirates, said the Kelron Prime Minister. Their deaths are no loss. Others weren't so sure. The speed of the engagement, the Veil speaker said slowly, means the humans knew about the attack before it happened. They had ships close enough to respond instantly. It requires foresight, planning, surveillance far beyond what they admit to having. And then came another complication. Intelligence agents discovered that the Karrick Brotherhood had recently been working under contract for an unnamed council member state. If the humans knew the Tand acted anyway, then the destruction of the pirates wasn't just a rescue. It was a message. In the dark briefing rooms of military headquarters across the galaxy, officers replayed the data. They calculated the timing, the weapon signatures, the impossible precision. Each time, the conclusion was the same. The humans hadn't fired in panic. They had fired in warning. Meanwhile, deep in human space, in a secure fleet command bunker beneath the Andes Mountains, Admiral Rena Calder read the after-action report. Her officers stood at attention as she scrolled through the details. "Clean work," she said at last. "No survivors?" "None," replied her operations chief. "Good. And the message?" "Transmitted exactly as ordered." Calder leaned back in her chair, her face lit by the cold blue glow of the tactical map. Red markers representing human fleets were slowly shifting into new positions. "Council will talk," she said quietly. "They'll tell themselves it was nothing." Her eyes narrowed. "Let them." The Tresh Dominion had never trusted humans. Even before the walkout, their intelligence service had been quietly probing human space, mapping trade routes, intercepting encrypted signals, and recruiting informants. But after the council meeting, the Tresh leaders wanted more than rumors. They wanted proof, so they sent in the Silent Wing, their most advanced reconnaissance squadron. 6 sleek scout ships, each equipped with cloaking fields that bent light around them, slipped across the human border under full stealth. Their mission? Penetrate deep, take sensor readings, and return before anyone knew they were there. At first, everything went according to plan. The edge of human territory seemed oddly empty. No patrols, no merchant vessels, no visible activity. The only signals they picked up were faint background transmissions, the kind you'd expect in uninhabited space. But then the strange things began. The lead ship, Shadow 1, reported a flicker on its scanners, something massive moving just beyond sensor range. A moment later, the flicker was gone. The squadron's commander dismissed it as interference from a nearby pulsar. 20 minutes later, Shadow 4 dropped out of formation. The commander's voice came through the fleet channel, sharp and annoyed. "Shadow 4, you've drifted off course. Correct immediately." No reply. The cloaked ships began active scans, but found nothing. Shadow 4 was simply gone. No debris, no distress beacon, no trace. Before they could regroup, Shadow 2 vanished as well. This time the pilot's last. Transmission was just 2 words, hurried, breathless. They ceased static. The squadron's nerves began to fray. Their cloaking fields stayed active, but the crew felt watched. Small noises inside their ship's fans humming. Hull plating creaking sounded unnaturally loud in the silence. Then the commander ordered a retreat. They turned back toward the border, accelerating hard. That was when they saw it. Something moved. Ahead of them, faint, like a shadow against a darker void. It was vast, featureless, and utterly silent. Sensors couldn't lock onto it, but the crew could feel it there, matching their speed. Every evasive maneuver they tried, it mirrored. Perfectly one by one, the remaining ships winked out of formation. No explosions, no weapon fire, just gone. Only Shadow 6 made it back to Dominion space. Its hull bore strange, shallow grooves, like the marks of enormous claws. The crew was alive, but not the same. Their eyes darted to every corner of the room, and they refused to speak above a whisper. In their debriefing, they described invisible weapons, unseen ships, and the sensation of being hunted. One officer swore he'd heard a voice in his comms channel that wasn't from his own. A calm human voice saying, "You should not be here." The council dismissed the report as stress-induced hallucinations. Officially, the loss of 5 ships was blamed on a navigational error near a gravitic anomaly. But the Tresh Dominion's intelligence chief knew better. When she reviewed the last seconds of Shadow 2's data feed, she caught something the analysts had missed a frame so quick it barely registered. A dark shape passing in front of the stars. A human warship, running without lights, and behind it, for the briefest moment, the cold gleam of what could only be the barrel of a weapon. The first sightings came from traders skirting the edge of human space. At first they thought the dark shapes against the stars were asteroids until they moved. Colossal structures hung in orbit over strategic systems, their silhouettes blotting out constellations. Each was a fortress in space, bristling with cannons the size of city blocks. They didn't broadcast identification codes, but their design was unmistakable human engineering. Raw and unpolished, built for one purpose only: destruction. Soon, more reports arrived. Defense grids had gone active along every known human border. Not a single hyperlane into their territory was unguarded. Merchant ships passing nearby described the unnerving sensation of being tracked by unseen targeting systems. Even from millions of kilometers away, one freighter captain swore he saw a weapon platform pivot toward him before his jump drive engaged. "It was like the thing knew where I was going to be," told the authorities. The council ordered a fleet of neutral inspectors to approach and verify the claims. They never made it past the border. The humans sent them a transmission before. They crossed the first defense line. "Turn back. You are not welcome." The inspectors obeyed, but the strangest development wasn't defensive, was offensive. Deep space construction fleets, instead of working inward to strengthen the human core worlds, began moving outward. Their destination, empty sectors closer. 2 council-controlled systems. From a distance, it looked like random activity. But military analysts saw the pattern. The humans weren't just protecting themselves. They were building forward positions places from which they could strike fast, hard, and without warning. In a closed-door council meeting, the Veil speaker stood and addressed the assembly. "We are witnessing the creation of an iron wall. And walls can keep enemies out, or they can lock prey inside." Still, some tried to dismiss the threat. Kelran Prime Minister scoffed. "They will not dare use these weapons against the Council. This is for show." But the Tresh Dominions. Intelligence Chief interrupted sharply. 5 of my ships entered their space and vanished without trace. That was before these fortresses appeared. Now you'd be lucky to get a probe in and back alive. Satellite imagery smuggled out of human space only deepened the unease. The massive defense platforms weren't alone. They were supported by swarms of smaller, fast-moving ships that vanished into shadow as soon as they were detected. Every known route into human space was now a killing field. And somewhere in those defenses, hidden from all but the most advanced scanners, were weapons far beyond anything the Council had on record. For the first time since humanity had walked out, the Council chamber felt something it had not felt in centuries. Fear. The Council's arguments had reached a fever pitch. For weeks, delegates screamed over each other, their voices echoing through the marble chamber. Some demanded immediate sanctions. Others insisted on diplomacy. A few whispered about striking first before the humans could. And then in the middle of another endless debate, a message arrived that froze the room. Antheris Prime, one of the Council's most fortified core worlds, had gone silent. At first, he assumed it was a communication glitch. But as the hours passed, no signals came from the planet, no traffic left orbit, and no military patrols checked in. A relief fleet was dispatched immediately. The journey took 3 days. When the fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel, above Antheris, they expected to find battle-damaged, scorched cities, wrecked ships, maybe even orbital bombardment scars. But the planet looked untouched. The cities glowed peacefully in the night, the oceans shimmered blue, and civilian air traffic moved as normal. It was the military that was gone. Every orbital defense platform, every planetary missile silo, every shield generator missing, not destroyed, removed. Bases stood empty, dockyards were deserted. Ships were simply gone, as if plucked from their berths without firing a shot. The fleet's ground teams swept the installations. There were no bodies, no signs of struggle, no alarms triggered. It was as if the soldiers had stood up, walked out, and taken every piece of military equipment with them, and in the heart of the capital city, the middle of its grand central plaza, was the only clue. Words carved deep into the marble. "We are patient but not forever." The fleet commander reported the findings back to the Council. The reaction was chaos. The Kelran Prime Minister called it impossible. The Veil speaker whispered, "It's a demonstration." The Tresh Intelligence Chief said nothing. Her eyes were fixed on the tactical maps, calculating how close the humans had come without being detected. That night, Antheris civilians began reporting strange encounters. A farmer swore he'd seen shadows moving across the fields, though nothing appeared on his sensors. A freighter pilot claimed his ship's systems shut down for exactly 17 minutes while in orbit when they restarted. He was missing half his cargo. The Council tried to control the panic, but the truth spread fast. If the humans could do this to a core world, slip past its defenses, take its weapons, leave without firing a shot, then nowhere was safe. And somewhere, in the silent war rooms of Earth, that was exactly the point. From a distance, it looked like any other fleet buildup. Ships took their places. Crews checked systems. Supplies were loaded. But up close, the scale was something else entirely, so large it made nearby starfields seem empty. Human fleets gathered in silent arcs along the outer lanes of their space. Frigates, Destroyers, carriers, and strange black-coated corvettes filled the maps. Tanker convoys moved like slow planets, carrying fuel and strange, carefully packed cargo. Repair tenders slotted between warships like quiet, patient spiders. Admiral Rena Calder walked the bridge of the flagship, as if she were walking through a calm before a storm. She listened to the soft clicks of the coms and the steady hum of life support. There was no shouting. There were no fanfares. Only the small sounds of preparation. On the tactical table, small lights blinked as fleets assumed formation. Each light represented a ship, a crew, a family. Each light could mean death for someone else. Calder's face stayed still, her hands folded behind her back. She thought of the council dinners, the polite lies, the centuries of speeches. She thought of the walkout and the silence that had followed. Status, her operations officer asked. All ships in position, he said. Supply lines hold. Forward platforms are built. Weapons calibrated. Calder nodded. Hold station. Do not engage unless ordered. Her voice was soft. The order was absolute. Across the human lines, captains ran drills. Now pilots slid through. Simulation runs, learning to move as if they were one organism. Maintenance crews worked in shifts, faces tired but steady. Engineers checked the strange devices packed into hidden bays, devices that hummed at frequencies council scientists could not yet name. Behind the scenes, logistics was the real miracle. Food, water, and parts flowed on invisible schedules. Civilian ports that had once hosted traders now moved fuel cells and construction frames with military precision. Old merchant captains who had spent their lives avoiding trouble found themselves running convoys that could not be stopped by simple piracy. The people of human worlds watched, some with fear, most with a hard calm. Street markets were quieter, but soldiers were less anxious than the merchants. In homes, children asked questions that parents refused to answer. In bars, old veterans drank in silence. The mood was not joy or anger. It was readiness cold. Iron readiness council watchers finally put a face on the movement. Long-range sensors traced the arcs and counted the ships. Diplomatic channels filled with urgent messages. Alliances were whispered into existence. Worlds that had once traded peacefully with Earth now debated fleets and blockades. A handful even offered to mediate, while quietly moving their own ships to safer orbits. Inside the council, meetings turned to emergency sessions. Maps were burned into holodisplays. Generals argued about preemptive strikes. Diplomats begged for more time. But time was what the humans had taken away when they walked out. You can still stop them, the Kelron Prime Minister said in one meeting, voice shaking. You can send a fleet and force them to stand down. You will not, the Veil. Speaker replied, you know it. Once you strike first, you lose the moral ground. The humans know this. That is why they wait. Wait. The word echoed through the hallways like a threat. It was not empty. The humans waited with purpose. They let the council squabble. They let spies poke and prod. They let rumor and fear do the work of fracturing alliances. All the while, their fleets tightened like a hand closing in a hidden command bunker. A small group of human strategists watched feeds from the front lines. They tracked enemy patrols, counted patrol rotations, and logged every diplomat who changed course. Each piece of data fit into a larger shape. Each shape spelled out a plan. One more week, said a young analyst, tapping a line on her screen. We can have forward batteries online in 7 days. The senior strategist did not smile. We do not attack in 7 days, he said. We act when the moment is right. Across the galaxy, mercantile captains switched sides, not with declarations, but with silence. Contracts were quietly canceled, warehouses emptied, and shipping routes redirected. Even some council members worried about trade and their people began to lower their voices in private. They feared the economic chaos that a sudden war would bring. Fear can be a weapon. The humans used it without firing a shot at the edge of human territory. A ring of squat black ships assembled around a forward platform. The platform hummed with energy as technicians made final calibrations. In the shadows between hulls, Small fighters hung like knives. Their pilots were young and steady. They had been trained for one thing: to change the shape of battle. In minutes, when the night came across the human command decks, the officers did not sleep. They checked systems again. They read old messages, memorized old protocols, and set the final watch. The fleet waited in disciplined patience. Outside, stars slid by like quiet witnesses. On the inner screens, diplomats in council chambers argued that showing restraint would save lives. Some military leaders spoke of crushing the human fleet before it could act. The galaxy divided into shaky lines of loyalty and the humans. They kept their silence. Their ships waited in formation. Their weapons were armed. Their engines were cold, but ready. They had stepped out of the grand hall of diplomacy, and in doing so, forced the galaxy to choose. Some chose fear. Some chose negotiation. A few chose to prepare for the worst, but whatever the council chose next, the human position was clear. They had built the storm, and now they watched the clouds gather. They were ready to break the quiet when the right moment came. The first sin was not a battle. It was a silence. Out on the rim, dozens of council listening posts went dark within minutes of each other. No distress calls, no sensor alarms, just empty channels where voices had been. Operators tried to reconnect, bouncing signals through relay stations. But the relays themselves were gone. Then came the shadows. Long-range patrols reported vast, silent shapes moving between the stars, bigger than carriers, shaped like nothing in any council registry. They didn't match known human warship profiles, but their movement was precise, coordinated. Every time a scout tried to close in, its sensors went blind. And then, in a single hour, the waiting was over. The humans moved at exactly 0400 standard. Fleets along 3 sectors advanced. Not at random, but in perfect synchronization. In the Veil border sector, black-coated corvettes slipped past patrols and disabled cum relays before the enemy knew they were there. In the Kelron trade lanes, massive human carriers appeared from nowhere, disgorging swarms of strike craft that darted between civilian traffic without harming a single freighter, effectively shutting the lanes down in the Tresh dominions. Outer colonies, the strike was surgical. Power grids went dark. Orbital defenses failed in seconds. And in each targeted city, residents awoke to find massive human dropships sitting in their central plazas, silent and unmoving. No shots fired, no declarations of war, just presence. On the council floor, pandemonium erupted. It's an invasion, shouted the Kelron Prime Minister. The Veil speaker countered. It's a warning. The Tresh intelligence chief only stared at the map. Seeing the precision how every human move cut a supply chain, blinded a sensor array, or locked a fleet in place without open combat. By 0600 standard, it was clear. The humans hadn't just built an iron wall. They had stepped through it. Admiral Rena Calder stood on the bridge of her flagship, eyes fixed on the tactical display. A dozen council fleets were mobilizing, but they were too far, too slow. Every delay was part of the plan. Her comms officer turned to her. Council channels are demanding we withdraw. Some are asking for terms. Calder nodded once. Tell them we're listening. Across the occupied zones, human soldiers stood guard without speaking. They did not take prisoners. They did not harm civilians. They only waited, calm and unshaken, as if time itself belonged to them. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy's balance had shifted, not with fire, but with silence and steel. And somewhere deep inside the council's grand hall, the oldest delegates began to understand. This was not the start of war. This was the moment humanity decided the rules had changed.